God, we give you thanks for this day. As the scriptures say, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Help us to receive that freeing thought that in a way we possess nothing, but in you we possess everything. With your grace, your salvation, your Holy Spirit, we have you with us. You say you'll be with us now and until the end of the age. Meet us in our doubt. Meet us in our sadness, our anger, our anxiety, our depression, our joy, our gratitude, and help us to grow with you today. In Jesus' name, amen. We're going to look at a story that many of you have maybe heard of before. But we're going to look at it with different glasses on or through a different lens. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. What I'm trying to tell you is that a lot of times as we discuss in a lot of our groups and stuff, the questions we bring to our experience of reading the Bible deeply affect how we read the Bible, sometimes causing us to have a bad or negative experience. I heard a quote once that says, the solution lies not in answers, but in better questions. So we're going to look at a story that you've probably heard of before, but we're going to bring different questions to it. And here's the example I thought of. We're close to Christmas. We're getting closer. Like we said, John Luby's in the spirit. He's got his Santa Claus pillow. So the Grinch. I'm going to show you how if you ask different questions of a story that you know, it can change the way that you read it or that you understand it. Do you know, let's wait in the comments, let's see. What is the actual title of the Dr. Seuss book? We'll wait for the comments. And like I said, there's a delay, so we'll have to wait for just a minute. What's the actual, without looking it up, without cheating, what is the actual title of the Dr. Seuss book about the Grinch? Christy Looper for the win. It is How the Grinch Stole Christmas, I think. Somebody wants to fact check me, you can. So that naturally makes the story about the Grinch, right? When so you're going into the story thinking that this story is about the Grinch and how the Grinch stole Christmas. But what if instead you're asking yourself if the title is The Who's from Whom Christmas Was Stolen, or How Christmas Was Not Stolen from the Who's? You're like, Ross, what in the world are you talking about? Well, now your focus might be more on the Who's. It might be more on how did they respond to when Christmas was stolen. That's part of the story to be sure, but now you might even be more tuned into that. You might be more tuned into the Who's. You might ask questions like, what makes a who a who? What makes the community of who's what they are? And then you might focus on this, for example. You might focus on how the who's, obviously when Christmas is stolen from them, they still sing. They sing even though they've lost all their stuff. You might pay attention to that. You might pay more attention, not just to the heart transformation of the Grinch, you might pay attention to how the Who's receive the Grinch into their company and community even after he's stolen a lot of stuff from them. They let him sit at their table. Do you see how the different questions we ask when we're reading something changes the way we experience it. When you think about it that way, the story of the Who's is a really a Jesus-y kind of story. People who sing in the midst of suffering, people who welcome people who steal from them to their table. It's pretty nuts. So today, we are going to look at, what's the classic story? Doug Adams says, who's on first? We're going to look at the classic story of the prodigal son. If you haven't heard that story before, don't worry. We're going to go through the details, but it's a pretty popular story. No, we didn't bring John Luby on with us today because he's a perfect example of prodigal son. We did not bring John on today. John, can you illustrate for us what a prodigal son looks like? John was actually supposed to be with us a couple of weeks ago and stuff, but it didn't work out for various reasons. So we're looking at the question, we're looking at the prodigal son story, but we're asking different questions. Instead of looking at that story through the lens of like the classic ones of like repentance and forgiveness and reconciliation, resentment, we're looking at it through stewardship. We're going to read that story through the lens of stewardship. And you're like, Ross, I don't know what that means. Well, here's what I mean. Here's exactly what we're asking as we read this story. What has God given us? And how do we receive what God gives us with humility, joy, gratitude, and responsibility? How do we live for the relationships for which God has made us and saved us? How do we receive what God has given us with humility, joy, gratitude, and responsibility? And how do we live for the relationships for which God made us and saved us? These are questions of stewardship. Really quick, and then we're going to turn it over to you for a poll. Not you, John, but to the group. Stewardship has the word steward in it. Another word for steward is manager. So, but a better word might be like partner, collaborator, or ambassador. Listen in. It's someone who receives something from someone else that the steward does not own. But in the best case scenario, it's someone who receives something from someone else that is out of the goodness of the heart of the giver. So out of the goodness of the giver's heart, he or she gives it to the steward. And the steward receives it to know the heart of the giver, to be grateful for the heart of the giver, to be joyful at what the steward has received, to be humble, remembering that the steward doesn't own it, and to be excited, not pressured or worried or fearful, but excited at the hope that comes with the gift. Last thing, if you've lost track, a steward is like somebody who is given an estate by an owner who is going away for a while to enjoy the estate, to care for it, to promote its welfare, and to share it with others. The steward is looking out for the wishes of the owner while the owner seems to be far away. A steward's like a manager, a collaborator, a partner, an ambassador of the giver. All right, now we're turning it over to you. Poll question. So this kind of ends our first segment for the day. And we'll welcome John to comment too in a minute. The question for you is, have you heard the word stewardship before? And if so, would you say A, yes, and I think I get it, B, yes, I've heard it, but I don't really get it. C, no, but what you're saying makes sense. Or D, no, I've not heard of it, and I'm really confused right now. So again, there's a delay. We'll wait for just a second for you to comment on that. And while you're commenting, I'm actually going to bring in John for a minute. John, have you heard the word stewardship before? And if so, do you feel like what I just said is like how you've heard it described before, or no? Or have you like not really, is it not a term that you're really familiar with?
Yeah, so in conversation, I really have only had the word steward or stewardship used one time, and I've told you about it when we had Recovery Church going on. It was when I was at a treatment center in Washington, Indiana, when I was probably 24 years old. And, obviously I wasn't very well off coming in there, but I just spent like $300 or something on workout supplements and all that stuff. And the guy that was running the place told me that I wasn't being a very good steward. So, that actually taught me a little lesson. And when I think of stewardship today, I just think of making the most out of what we're given, or, using our blessings to honor God in the best way possible. That's where what I think of stewardship as.
Awesome, man. I remember that story now. Yeah. I'm going to look over at the comments now and see what people are saying. I think I saw a lot of A's and B's in what people shared, so we had a lot of people who said, yes, I've heard it before and I think I get it. Spencer, folks, you got to understand, Spencer Medcalf and John Luby are like the odd couple. They share a common journey together and they love each other, so they constantly throw shade at each other. They are our co-leaders with me of Recovery Church. So John's going to share a little bit more about that today. So I think I saw a lot of A's and B's in there. So it's either yes, I think I get it. Yes, but I don't know if I get it. So well, hang in there with us because we're going to keep expanding on this idea. We're going to read this classic story through the lens of stewardship. So, C was, someone asked what was C. C was, no, I've never heard of stewardship. I've never heard that word, but what you're saying makes sense. And D was, no, I've never heard of it before, and I have no idea. Oh, Angela just said, never mind, don't answer that. Well, I answered it anyways. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next segment. We're going to do 3 segments. We're already through 1. Segment 2 is kind of like what happens in the story. And I want you to listen in on this. So if you want to follow along with us, we are in Luke, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 15. So Luke is one of the accounts of Jesus's life. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You got 4 accounts of Jesus's life in the New Testament. And Luke has a set of parables that are pretty popular in the 15th chapter of Luke. And we're picking up one that's traditionally called the parable of the prodigal son. And again, we're going to look at it through the lens of stewardship. Some of those questions we ask, like John said, like, what does God give us? And what do we do with the gifts God give us? We're in a series called Everything is a Gift. What do we do with the gifts that God has given us? Do we receive them with humility, joy, and a sense of responsibility for our place in the mission with God. Is everybody still doing good on Facebook Live? If we could just get a quick like thumbs up from people or something that lets us know that we're not messing up this technology. Let's see. Let's pause for a minute, and then we're going to jump into it. Oh, we got a thumbs up, so we're rolling on. So here's how it starts. We got a couple. Okay. Luke 15 starts out with verse 11, chapter 15, verse 11. A certain man had two sons. Now, if you were a first hearer of this story, one of the first hearers of this story in Jesus's time, you'd immediately be transported to other stories from the Old Testament. The part of the Bible that details God's creating the world and building a relationship with God's people, the Israelites. Things go bad, really bad. The prophets come along and look for a future, which Jesus is the fulfillment of. If you heard Jesus's story that says a certain man had two sons, you'd immediately think of things like Jacob and Esau, a story we looked at several weeks ago. You'd think about a story of Cain and Abel, where two sons or two brothers are featured in a story, but we're not going there today. Listen to this. Right off the bat, we get questions of stewardship. Right off the bat, in verse 12, the younger man said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." That's it. I'll stop there. Dad, give me my share of the inheritance. Just let that sit with you for a minute. Then the father divided his estate between them. Soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a faraway land. Now, over to you. Questions to you. Right off the bat, without even knowing the context of what happened, is this son being a good steward? So think about John's experience when he was in treatment. Someone just came up to him and said straight up, "I don't think you're being a good steward, man." Do you think this son is being a good steward? Goes up to his dad and says, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." And soon afterwards, he gathers everything together and takes a trip to a faraway land. "Give me it all, Dad. Give me my share." Is he humble? Does he sound grateful? Does he sound joyful? I guess that remains to be seen. Responsible? That remains to be seen. Hopeful? Like hopeful in the sense of like, wow, I have these gifts and there's hope of me doing something with them. Joining with God, partnering with my Father in these greater purposes of being an ambassador of my Father's estate. Looks like Missy asks, what is he doing in a faraway land? We will find out. These are questions of stewardship that we're asking. And think about what his dad could have said. Think about it for a minute, because this is also like we're looking through the lens of stewardship. He could have said to him, "Hey, bud, I don't know what you think you're entitled to, but all of this is mine. And you get to live here by my good graces." Any folks out there have their parents say to them at some point, "You live under my roof, so you live under my rules." He could have said that. He could have said, "If I so choose, I could enjoy the best of my estate until my dying breath. And if you're lucky, I might leave enough for you to be able to spend your life growing this estate and blessing the people who relate to it like I have." But remember this, we talked about this last week, those precious gifts of freedom and power. Those come into play here. The dad in this story honors his son's gifts, the dangerous gifts of free will and power. And his dad basically says, okay, if this is what you want to make of our relationship, if this is what you want to make of the desires God has given you, if this is what you want to make of these resources we have, I'm not going to go stop you. Do with it what you will. I remember that story, Angela. Next part of the story, we'll keep going in this segment. Soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a faraway land. There he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. That's the end of this segment here. He wasted his wealth on extravagant living. I think we can all agree at this point that that is not good stewardship. He gathers everything and goes far away and wastes it all on himself. That's not humble of him. He's not acting in recognition that a few days earlier he held in possession none of this, but now because his father said okay, he possesses all of it and he wastes it all. It's not grateful because, as you're going to see, when you're grateful, you're peaceful, you're fulfilled. You're not hustling around trying to fill this giant void inside you. You're content, you pay it forward. He's not joyful, as we're going to see. The question that hits me, though, is the one about responsibility. Responsible sounds like such an adulting word, but in this case, here's what we're asking. Does this son take the things he now has and have any sense of connection to the one who gave him what he has? Does he demonstrate any sense of commitment and connection to his neighbors? No, he goes on a bender. He wasted his wealth through extravagant living. And it brings up a question to us, to you and me. Will we share our wealth through extravagant giving or waste our wealth through extravagant living? Will we share our wealth through extravagant giving or waste our wealth through extravagant living? When we're in patterns of extravagant, wasteful living, I think we'll know it because it won't fill the void. Our hearts and minds will be out of balance. It means like we're either going to be consuming, destroying for ourselves, or there could be another side of it. We're just pouring our gifts out to everyone else out of insecurity. We're doing the people-pleasing thing. We're taking all the gifts God given us and we're running ourselves ragged, pouring them out to everybody, everywhere. We're not actually like enjoying God. Remember the commandment says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. God gives us gifts so that we'll know God and enjoy God, so that we'll have joy. But also back to the other side of the coin, not so that we'll just consume it all and destroy things, our bodies, our desires, our minds, our relationships, so we can feel good for a minute, but not fill the void. By the way, did you know your desires are a gift? Sometimes the church has made that, has not made that point. Pleasure is a gift. But when desires and pleasures become a means to a selfish end, like I'm going to go get mine, we're going to harm other people. We're going to victimize people. So this isn't just about money for this guy, and it's not just about money for us. It's about his desires, his relationships, his body, his time, and yes, his money. All right, so we're going to turn it back over to you. We're at the end of segment 2. I want to ask you these questions. We only have one segment left before we go today, and that segment features John Luby in just a minute. Extravagant living, extravagant giving. What do you think? What do those things say to you? I just want to hear, like, what are you hearing in this story so far? John, you got any comments when you on what you hear so far when you think about like what we talked about, extravagant living or extravagant giving?
No, yeah, that's definitely a relevant topic for me and going to be a relevant topic for the rest of my life, probably. Because I do, sometimes try to use those materialistic things to fill an inner void, probably. And, it's definitely good for me to hear that, a lot of those blessings I receive should be given in a giving way rather than something for myself, and as a result, I always feel better when I'm contributing and helping other people. So it makes no sense that sometimes I choose to indulge in these selfish behaviors, because at the end of the day, I can't take it with me anyway. And, it's all a gift to begin with. So it's not even rightfully mine anyway, so I've heard it many times, but it's something that I always need to circle back to and focus on, because it's definitely one of my my downfalls for sure.
No, thanks, John. I'm gonna check out the comments now and see what we got. Angela says, I always find myself wondering and reanalyzing what is it considered extravagant. Mo says, to give from the heart allows someone to live joyfully. We're actually gonna, like I said, I swear to you guys, like we didn't bring in John today. We didn't bring in John today because, like, hey, John is the perfect example of the prodigal son. We had John on the schedule before this was the story. So, but John's going to share a bit of, we're just going to listen in to his story for a minute. So give John some virtual applause for joining us today and being courageous and brave enough to share his story. So first of all, John, where are you from, man?
I am from, well, first of all, I don't mind coming on here and being the, example, because I am a great example. So hopefully something I say can help somebody else. But yeah, so I'm from Evansville, Indiana, and lived in the Franklin area now for a couple years or so.
Yeah, I met John. John and I first met each other at Ann's restaurant when John was a server there, and I could just see grace at work and John's been a blessing to my life. So what are you doing now, John? Like, you're not working at Ann's anymore. Where are you working?
No, so I've since moved on from Ann's. It was a great stepping stone. I started out there as it was a requirement to volunteer there in the transitional housing I lived in. So it was a great experience. Met a lot of great people, including you. I could also tell there was something different about Ross when I first met him. He just had the Spirit of God in him. And that's why I was drawn to him and have since tried to continue this relationship, But yeah, since then I've moved on to, I tried, and it required patience. I tried to get into a union electrician apprenticeship for a while. and had to wait probably 6, 7, 8 months and finally got into that. So that's what I'm currently doing.
Awesome, man. All right, John, let's get into it. So John, when did you start using, and what in your mind influenced that?
Yeah, so it's of the belief, and my belief too, that this is a disease. But it starts way before that. Even before I started drinking and drugging, I could tell that in hindsight that I had certain characteristics that probably made this loud and clear before I even started doing any of that stuff. My father went to a treatment center when he was 19 and has been sober ever since. I took my first drink or drug when I was probably 15 or 16. And it was bound to happen at some point, but the reason it happened then was because I was just trying to fit in. For so long I've kind of felt like I didn't fit in, had to be that social chameleon to get validation, acceptance from everybody. And that was just the thing to do that night. And it started a roller coaster of things to come after that. But yeah, that first night, it was basically just peer pressure and me trying to make an impression, to have people like me. It was a time when I was about to enter high school and had to make a couple of decisions about who I was going to be. And at that time, I chose to put away any morals I had, just to be selfish and try to be liked by everybody, basically. So yeah, that was the first time, and a lot more came after that for sure.
How bad did it get?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put into words about how bad it got. It has been a long road. I don't even remember what age I said, but yeah, it probably started about freshman year. And we talked about this a little bit. I know there can be children listening or whatever, so I'm going to censor it a little bit and just talk vague details. But yeah, it escalated from drinking and marijuana use into a lot harder stuff. And obviously that's very dangerous and everything. And it took me to a place where, I like to call it, I was just spiritually bankrupt. My relationships were terrible. And people I cared about, my family, that's kind of where I have guilt today, is just all the stuff I put them through. It was tough for them to even have a conversation with me because I was so shut off and embarrassed. And I acted out towards them in violent ways sometimes, not towards them, but verbally manipulative and stuff like that. It basically took me to a place where I knew every day I woke up, it was going to be the worst day of my life, basically. And not even, that can be true for so many people, not just me who has issues with drinking and drugging. I've had other things manifest in my life where I just stop relying on God and start trying to find happiness in other things. And it takes me to the same place every time when I stop leaning on God and start taking over my own life again. But it's just self-will run riot, basically. Anything I do on my own without the help of God is going to take me to a place that's very awful. And even having been sober for a while, I know it can go back very fast if I take over the wheel again and stop relying on God. So it got very bad, but today I do have hope because through the program, through Recovery Church, through God, it has gotten so much better, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Thanks, John. And again, we're not here today to exploit John's story. We're here today because John has wisdom about the spiritual journey with Christ that I myself need to learn from. I don't know if you just saw it, John's his willingness to be vulnerable, his willingness to be, like a classic church word is repentant, like, but that just means like John is very aware, like that he has to every day, turn towards, God, and every day is a new day. And I learn from John every time he shares a story. We're here to learn from his wisdom. John, what's your sobriety date?
December 7th, 2017, I think. 3 years, December 7th. So whatever that is. Yeah. 17.
What influenced that?
It talks a word I was trying to think of when I was just talking. I couldn't think of it, but in the big book we kind of go by, it talks about pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization, meaning, I just got to a place where I was done, this last time I went to treatment, because I've had to do this a couple different times, and wasn't fully ready in the past. But this last time, I'll censor it a little bit. But I had relapsed for a short time and ended up overdosing in my car in Indianapolis. And they told me I could either go to jail or go to the hospital and get help. And that's what I chose to do. But it just took me to a place where I was at my knees. I was ready to take suggestions, do whatever I needed to do to finally whip this thing, I guess. I just had enough. That's what it boils down to, I was getting ready to end it all. I could not continue on that way anymore. It just was so miserable. And again, I like to try to relate it because I know not everybody in the chat or viewers has issues like mine, but I can get that way in sobriety too, get to a bad place. If I start relying on other things for happiness and drift away. And it's funny, or not funny, but it's interesting to look back over my period of sobriety to see that ebb and flow of, being tied into God, being close, and then drifting away a little bit. And until I get miserable enough, then I come crawling back and kind of refocus things, So it's not always easy, but I'm just grateful that, God has showed me grace and given me another chance, Yeah.
It's just there again that your example to be brutally honest and self-examine, it just teaches me, like that's what stewardship is like, with everything in my life and my body, my desires, my time, my relationships, my money. Am I using any of those things to fill? I know they talk about this in the meetings, this God-sized hole, and it sounds to me like you started to be kind of a more joyful steward of everything.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And thank God for all. I talked to you about this when we were kind of talking on the phone prior to this. Thank God for all of the prayers I received, because I believe that brought me to a place where I was ready to get help. My family has, I don't even know how long they've been praying for me. My mom's been in support groups for probably over 10 years now. And just thinking about the branches of people who have talked about me and, have used that power of prayer to bring me back, it's crazy to think about, but I definitely don't deserve to be here today. The things that I've done, it's only by God's grace that I'm here, and,
That's true.
thank God for everybody who set an example for me, that had a God work in their life that finally made me believe that this was the answer too. I went through Catholic school, and I was exposed to all that stuff, but I never bought into it because maybe I was too young and naive. I don't know. But until I saw God working in other people's lives and thought this could be the answer, I was never willing to actually put the work in, even though it was right in front of my eyes for my whole life, you know. So thank God for God working in people in front of me and witnessing to me.
Well, John, thank God for you, man. I think Roger Price said it there in the comments. Like he said, you know, stand tall, walk proud. Like there is a pride, I think, that is healthy in God, that you know, when we're stewards of grace, we know we're sinners, and yet we also know that we are worthy of God's love and redeemed. Man, we can stand tall. So thanks, John. We're gonna do our last segment. We are going to go till 10:30 today. So we wanted to feature John's story. So give John another virtual round of applause.
Hey, real quick, one last thing.
Ooh, hit it, John.
Yeah, if anybody out there has anybody struggling or anything, send them our way to Recovery Church. We just had a new guy last week, which was great, to be able to bring him into our group. But yeah, we want to help whoever we can, and it's a safe space where, you know, we can get honest about whatever's going on. You know, I've had something that's been eating me up, and I was able to get honest about it because, you know, I felt like I was in a safe space. So, you know, the more the merrier. If anybody has anybody struggling, please send them our way.
Hear, hear. Yeah, so we meet on Wednesday nights at 6:30 p.m. at the church. That's one thing we're going to continue to do in person just because it's that important. We're going to socially distance, wear masks, but it's just something we believe is essential. We see those prayers, Mo. We're definitely thinking of him. But yeah, we're having a Recovery Church Thanksgiving this Wednesday at 6:30 at 309 East Main Street. It's a safe place. It's a place of truth telling, a place of mutual support, and where we try to help each other. The last segment today, we're going to go back to the story, and then this is the last thing for today. Go back to this story. We're calling this segment 3 of this story, The Turn. We're in Luke 15, verse 14. So listen to what it says here. It says, when he, the son, had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. Think about really quick how he burns up all of his resources, and now he has nothing for himself or to help anyone else when that severe food shortage happened. He was in the position with all of his gifts of helping people in the midst of a food shortage. He burned it all up, and now he doesn't have it. And now he's relying on the stewardship of someone else. Will someone hire a foreigner like him? Somebody does. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from what pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. So he gets a job as a farmhand feeding pigs. It's assumed in the story that he's of the people of Israel, of Jesus' ancestors. Jesus is telling the story. In that time, pigs were considered unclean. This story is showing us, again, some of the consequences that happen as a result of human free will. God didn't curse this guy. This guy, there are consequences to our choices. He let his selfish cravings govern the gifts of his desires, time, money, body, relationships, and so on. It's like John said, addiction is a disease. And we underline that, we underscore that. But John would also be the one to tell you that his choices were interwoven into that as well. So this guy wastes his gifts on extravagant living and gets so bad that he longs to eat his fill from what the pigs ate. And listen to this. This is the final, he's starting to turn. Listen to what coming to his senses sounds like. When he came to his senses, verse 17, he said, how many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food, but I'm starving to death? I will get up and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Take me on as one of your hired hands. So he got up and went to his father. That's what coming to his senses sounded like. He begins to believe he's not worthy of being called a son anymore. Nobody told him that. He's totally destroyed. He feels like less than a pig. I think the teaching here is like when we practice poor stewardship, it tends to warp everything, but especially our sense of identity. He believes now that everything's lost, but listen to his father. The story ends with the reminder that the best gifts aren't things. Verse 20, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to hug him, and he kissed him. Then his son said, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quickly, now here the stuff comes, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his fingers and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fattened calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found. Friends, it's never too late. You never, ever stop being a son or a daughter of God, no matter how much you waste or the harm you create with your desires, body, time, money, relationships. The time for extravagant receiving and giving is now. We are meant to be extravagant receivers of grace and then extravagant givers. The time for joyful stewardship is now. It's never too late. You're never not a son or daughter. Jesus makes that clear. The very last point is on the older brother. If I were there, I would feel like the older brother, because it could be said that the father is wasting his things on an extravagant, even reckless son. The father's being extravagant, reckless, to the point that this other son, the other brother's furious. Verse 25, his older son was in the field. Coming in from the field, he approached the house and heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked, what's going on? The servant replied, your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he received his son back safe and sound. Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in, but his father came out and begged him. The father goes to get him too. He answered his father, look, I've served you all these years. I've never disobeyed your instruction, yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. When this son of yours returned, after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him. Then his father said, son, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost, but he's found. The fundamental fact remains that the father still owns it all and could do with it whatever he pleases, and yet the father does not exploit this fact. Instead, he extends grace to his older son as well. It's like he's saying to the older son, I do celebrate your brother's return, but I ain't going to give your brother any more of this estate. It still remains that he burned up his share, but I will not withhold my compassion from him. I will not withhold my grace from him, and I will not withhold it from you. He said sorry, and I forgive him. He was lost. Now he's found. This estate, the rest of it goes to you. You're always with me. All I have is yours. Friends, it's never too late. You're never not a son or daughter, no matter how much you waste or the harm you create. You are meant to be an extravagant receiver of grace, an extravagant giver out of the gifts you have received. So go be a good steward of your body, your desires, your pleasure, your time, your money, your relationships. Go bless the world. Thank you for being with us today. Another thanks to John Luby for joining in. We appreciate his being with us. If Michael Benson tagged that on a comment, today would be a very good time to listen to a song by Josh Garrels called The Table, I believe. It's really, really good stuff. When you give to the church, you're supporting things like Recovery Church. This year, it was funded out of a grant from Drug Free Johnson County. In the future, some of the funding will come out of our day-to-day operations. When you give to our mission, you give to recovery. So thank you for joining us today. And now go with the hope of the Father, the grace of the Father shown to us in Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit who is with us until the end of the age. Go in God's peace. Amen.